London, 1820. Pembroke townhouse shone as it always had. Hundreds of candles reflected in tall mirrors, multiplying the illusion of abundance, while crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like promises never meant for everyone in the room. Trained laughter, measured conversations, and the soft glide of shoes across polished floors filled the grand ballroom. To London society, it was simply another night of celebration. To Elelena Ashworth, it was another night of being unseen. She stood near a marble pillar, slightly removed from the heart of the ballroom, her posture flawless, not from shyness, but from habit. By the age of 27, Elelena had learned that to exist in society was to occupy borrowed space, space that could be revoked at any moment. A paid companion, silent, replaceable. A lady's companion was not invited to dance, not presented with enthusiasm, not expected to dream of romance. Certainly not of love. As young debutantes spun across the floor, wrapped in silk, expectation, and respectable surnames, Elelena kept her hands folded calmly before her. She watched, she always watched, as if life unfolded behind glass. Her fingers brushed the pearls at her throat, old, modest, out of fashion. Her mother's, the last remnant of dignity salvaged from the public ruin that had destroyed her family years before. The whispers reached her effortlessly. They always did. She did not need to hear them to know them. No fortune, no charm, no future. Elelena's face remained serene. She had learned early that reacting granted power. Silence, for women like her, was the only way to survive without breaking. Lady Beatrice Pembroke crossed the room surrounded by acquaintances, and Elelena followed at a discreet distance, attentive, ready to serve. Her role was to anticipate needs, to vanish when convenient, to exist only when useful. And tonight, everything seemed to follow the familiar script. Until the music stopped, the silence spread slowly, like a ripple through the room. Conversations lowered. Laughter faded. Heads turned toward the entrance. The announcement rang out clear and unmistakable. His Excellency, the Count of Ravensmere. The air shifted. Elelena felt it before she understood it. Years had passed since she had heard that title spoken aloud. Years since she had trained herself not to react to it. Still, her body stiffened in betrayal of her composure. The Count of Ravensmere entered the ballroom with the confidence of a man who had never learned to ask permission. Tall, elegant, impeccably dressed, he carried the comfortable weight of a respected name. His expression was controlled, but his eyes did not wander as they once had. They searched. When they found her, the impact was immediate. It was not surprise, it was recognition, not as one sees, but as one claims. The past, which she believed buried beneath years of restraint, rose sharply. Memories long suppressed, pressed against the edges of her calm. She did not look away, not from courage, but from dignity. The Count approached, ignoring the curious glances, the gathering murmurs. He stopped before her, closer than propriety allowed, yet far from intimacy. "Apologize," he demanded. The word fell like a blade between them. Not a request, an order, the final attempt to keep her where the world had decided she belonged. For a brief moment, the ballroom disappeared. She saw the man who once admired her intelligence, who listened when she spoke, who made her believe, without ever promising, the choice might exist beyond social rank. She also saw his silence when her father was publicly ruined, his withdrawal, his failure to defend her, the bond that ended not with words, but with shame. Elelena inhaled slowly. The room watched. The world waited. "Or let me go," she replied. Her voice did not rise. There was no theatrical defiance. Its strength lay in its calm. The silence that followed was not polite. It was absolute. 200 eyes fixed upon them, 200 breaths held, and in that moment, the man who believed himself master of the evening understood he had lost something he never knew how to protect. The Count raised a hand to his face, and he cried, not discreetly, not quietly, but with the collapse of a man finally facing the cost of his fear. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Elena did not wait for permission. She turned. She walked toward the doors with steady steps, ignoring the weight of judgment, of expectation, of the past clawing at her back. Each step was a severing, each step a decision. When she crossed the threshold, the cold London air touched her face, and for the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Not relief, not victory, but a fragile spark of freedom. She did not yet know the price this choice would demand, did not know that this confrontation would alter both their lives, did not know that love, once broken by fear, does not end. It waits. And that night, while London whispered scandal, Elena Ashworth stepped out of the story written for her, and into one she would choose to build herself. But not all departures are endings. Some are the beginning of a love that demands courage enough to be lived. And the Count of Ravensmere, exposed before society and himself, had just learned that truth in the most painful way possible. Years earlier, London. Before silence became their language, there had been words, not loud ones, not reckless ones, but careful sentences exchanged in corners of drawing rooms, during slow walks in gardens where roses listened better than people, and across tables set for tea where servants pretended not to hear. Elena Ashworth had not been meant to matter to him. That was the truth everyone accepted. She was the daughter of a respectable, though not powerful, gentleman. Intelligent, observant, and far too opinionated for her own good. She had been raised to understand literature, politics, and the subtle cruelties of society, but not to expect rescue. The Count of Ravensmere, on the other hand, had been raised to rule rooms without effort, yet something about her unsettled him from the beginning. It was not her beauty, though others quietly acknowledged it. It was the way she listened, the way she paused before answering, as if weighing the truth against politeness, and choosing truth more often than not. They first spoke properly at a modest dinner, one meant to be forgettable. It was not, "Do you truly believe most people say what they mean?" she had asked, stirring her tea with deliberate calm. He had smiled, amused. "I believe most people say what is safest." She met his gaze then, unflinching. How exhausting that must be. He laughed, a real laugh, unrestrained. From that moment, he sought her company with subtle persistence, always appropriate, always cautious, never public enough to invite speculation. He admired her mind openly, but only where it would not be overheard, praised her insight behind closed doors, asked her opinion when no one else was present. She noticed, of course she noticed, and against her better judgment she began to hope. Hope was dangerous for women like Elena. Still, she allowed it. He spoke to her of books he pretended to have finished, of parliament debates he claimed bored him, though his questions betrayed fascination. He listened when she spoke of fairness, of women's invisibility, of the quiet violence of reputation. "Ah, you see too clearly for your own safety," he once told her, half smiling. "Someone must," she replied. Those moments were not stolen kisses or dramatic confessions. They were worse. They were intimate understanding, and intimacy, once formed, is difficult to survive without. She believed, foolishly perhaps, that understanding would be enough, that when the moment came, he would choose her. Then came the ruin. It arrived swiftly, publicly, without mercy. Her father's name appeared in whispers first, then in print, accusations of poor investments, questionable alliances, debts concealed too long. Men who once dined at their table suddenly crossed the street to avoid recognition. The Ashworth home grew quieter by the day. Elena watched her mother age within weeks, and she waited for him, not for rescue, not for wealth, just for defense, for a word spoken aloud, for a hand offered publicly. But the Count of Ravensmere did not come. He did not call. He did not send word. He vanished. When they finally met again, by chance, cruelly, it was in a crowded hallway where escape was impossible. He looked at her with something close to regret. Close. "This is unfortunate," he said softly. She stared at him. "Unfortunate," she repeated. He glanced around, aware of listening ears. "You must understand the position this places me in." That was when she realized. He had understood all along, and still chosen safety. Their connection did not end with a dramatic farewell. It ended in silence, the kind that leaves no closure, only questions. And Elena learned a lesson that night she never forgot. Love offered only in private is not love. It is convenience. Years later, standing in Lady Pembroke's townhouse after the scandal, Elena folded garments with methodical care. The quiet of her small room pressed against her thoughts. She did not cry. She had cried enough years ago. What surprised her was not the confrontation, but the relief that followed. Lady Pembroke knocked once before entering. "You caused quite the scene," she said, not unkindly. Elena inclined her head. "I did not intend to." "Intent rarely matters," Lady Pembroke replied dryly. "Only effect." A pause. "Do you regret it?" Elena considered. "No." That answer seemed to settle something. "Then you must decide what comes next," Lady Pembroke said. "London will not forget tonight quickly." Elena knew that, which was why, when dawn came, she had already made her choice. She would leave, not in shame, in clarity. As for the Count of Ravensmere, he did not sleep. The image of her walking away replayed endlessly. Her calm refusal, her dignity, the way the room had turned against him, not out of malice, but recognition. For the first time, society had seen him not as a duke commanding respect, but as a man ruled by fear, and that realization hollowed him. He told himself he had done what was necessary, what was expected, but the echo of her voice would not leave him, or let me go. He had thought he was prepared to lose her once. He had been wrong. And somewhere in London, as dawn broke over streets already alive with rumour, two lives moved quietly toward transformation, one toward freedom, the other toward reckoning. Neither yet understood that distance does not end love. It tests whether it deserves to survive. London, 1820. The morning of the ball. Elena woke before the city fully stirred. The light that slipped through the narrow window of her room was pale and restrained, the kind that made no promises. She sat up slowly, listening to the distant sounds of carriages, vendors calling out wares, and the quiet rhythm of a household preparing for an important evening. Today was the Pembroke ball. She had known it would come. Of course she had. Every season carried its rituals, and this was Lady Pembroke's most anticipated event. The annual gathering meant to reaffirm alliances, display eligible daughters, and remind London society precisely who still belonged. Elena washed, dressed, and pinned her hair with practiced precision. No hesitation, no indulgence. She did not allow herself to think of ballrooms or music or memories that stirred too easily. By mid-morning, Lady Beatrice Pembroke summoned her. "You're quiet today," Lady Pembroke observed, as Elena adjusted the folds of a gown laid carefully across the bed. "I rarely speak when there is nothing useful to say," Elena replied. Lady Pembroke smiled faintly. "So, a dangerous habit. People dislike being denied conversation. People often mistake silence for ignorance." Elelanena said gently. Lady Pembroke chuckled. Yes, I imagine they do. As Elelanena fastened buttons and arranged ribbons, a maid entered hurriedly, cheeks flushed with excitement. "My lady," she began, lowering her voice. "There are rumors." Elelanena felt it immediately. "The shift. Rumors are never late," Lady Pembroke replied dryly. "Only persistent. They say the Count of Ravensmere will attend tonight." The room stilled. Elelanena did not look up, not immediately. When she did, her expression was composed, but something behind her eyes had sharpened. "I see," Lady Pembroke said. "That will certainly increase attendance. They say he has not appeared in public for weeks," the maid continued. "Some say he's changed." Elelanena returned to her task. Changed. People always said that about men when they grew quieter. By noon, the townhouse buzzed with anticipation. Florists arrived, musicians rehearsed, silverware was polished until reflections stared back accusingly. Elelanena moved through it all like a shadow, efficient and invisible. And yet, everywhere she went, whispers followed. "She'll be there. Did you hear what happened years ago? They say he never married because of her." Elelanena kept her gaze forward. She had made a decision. She would not leave her position before the ball, not yet. She would not grant London the satisfaction of believing she fled. She would endure. By mid-afternoon, she retreated briefly to the small sitting room reserved for staff. There, alone, she allowed herself one moment of stillness. One memory surfaced uninvited. Him, standing beside her in a garden years ago. Voice lowered. "You deserve more than this world would allow you." She had believed him. That belief had nearly destroyed her. She exhaled slowly. Not tonight. Tonight she would be unremarkable, unreachable, unclaimed. Across the city, the Count of Ravensmere stood before a mirror he barely recognized himself in. His valet adjusted his coat with careful hands. "You're certain you wish to attend, sir?" the man asked quietly. The Count did not answer immediately. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. Regret had a way of settling into the shoulders. "Yes," he said finally, "I am certain." The carriage ride felt longer than usual. Every street seemed to whisper accusation. Every passing window reflected a man he no longer admired. He told himself he was attending out of obligation, out of closure. He told himself many things, but beneath them all lay a truth he could no longer deny. He wanted to see her, not as she had been, but as she was now. By early evening, Pembroke Townhouse was transformed. Candlelight softened the edges of judgment. Music filled spaces where silence once ruled. The ballroom shimmered with movement and expectation. Elelanena entered last, not announced, not observed with ceremony, simply present. Her gown was modest, elegant without display. She wore the pearls again, not as nostalgia, but as armor. She took her place near the edges of the room and waited. The Count arrived moments later. The announcement rippled through the ballroom. Eyes turned, conversations paused, and then, inevitably, they saw each other. Time did not stop, but something tightened. Their gazes met across the room, heavy with everything unsaid, desire restrained, pain unresolved, longing sharpened by years of silence. He moved toward her, stopped by greetings, obligations, interruptions. She turned away, not from fear, but from resolve. Each step he took toward her felt delayed by fate itself. Each moment she avoided him strengthened her resolve. The tension stretched, and somewhere between the first dance and the second, something snapped. Narrator's observation, in the style of Lady Whistledown. Ah, dear reader, how quickly London forgets that love, once planted, does not die simply because society disapproves. It waits, it watches, and it returns at the most inconvenient of moments. Now tell me, was it pride that led him forward, or fear that made her turn away? If you have an opinion, I would very much love to read it. The Count finally reached her. His voice was low. "We need to speak." She met his gaze. "No," she replied softly. "We do not." The room seemed to lean in, and in that fragile moment, balanced between restraint and collapse, the world waited to see which of them would break first. The ballroom was too warm. Or perhaps it was the tension that made the air feel heavy, thick with anticipation and restrained curiosity. Candles burned steadily, their flames unmoved, as if even they were holding their breath. Elena felt it before she saw him again. That sense of being drawn into a moment she had sworn she would not repeat. Music swelled. Couples took the floor. Laughter rose in polite waves. Yet beneath it all, something brittle stretched tighter with every passing second. She kept to the edges, always the edges, but the Count of Ravensmere was no longer willing to remain there. He watched her from across the room, his jaw clenched, his expression a careful mask worn too long. Each time he attempted to approach, he was intercepted, a greeting here, a question there, a reminder of his obligations to society. Obligations. They had always been his refuge. Elena spoke little. When she did, her voice was composed, her replies measured. Several gentlemen attempted polite conversation, some curious, some opportunistic, but she disengaged with practiced ease. She did not belong to any of them, and she would not pretend otherwise. At last, during a pause between dances, the Count broke free. He crossed the ballroom with unmistakable intent. Conversations faltered. Eyes followed. Elena sensed him behind her before he spoke. "You cannot continue pretending I do not exist." She turned slowly. "I'm not pretending," she replied. "I simply no longer arrange my life around you." The words struck deeper than she intended, or perhaps exactly as she intended. A faint smile curved his lips, humorless. "You always did know where to place the blade. Only when I was cornered," she said calmly. "They stood too close, too visible, and London noticed." "We should speak privately," he insisted. "There is nothing private left between us," Elena replied. Her composure unsettled him. He had expected anger, tears, accusation, not this quiet, immovable resolve. "You humiliated me," he said, his voice lowering. "You made me look a fool." Elena tilted her head slightly. "No," she corrected. "I answered you honestly. The shift in him was immediate. Something sharp surfaced. Pride wounded too deeply to remain silent. "You owe me an apology," he said, louder now. Nearby conversation stilled. The words echoed. Elena's heart did not race. It settled. "For what precisely?" she asked. "For abandoning your place," he replied. "For forcing this spectacle. For forgetting the grace expected of you." Expected of you. The phrase tasted bitter. "My place," she repeated quietly. Several guests turned fully now. A lady gasped. A gentleman frowned. The Count straightened, aware of the attention, and emboldened by it. "Yes, you know very well what I mean." Elena looked around the ballroom, at the faces watching, judging, waiting, and she understood then, with perfect clarity, that this moment would define her. She could soften, she could retreat, she could apologize for existing too boldly. She chose otherwise. "My place," she said evenly, "was never beside silence." The Count stiffened. "You are being unreasonable." "I was patient," she replied. "I was quiet. I was invisible when it suited everyone else." And still it was not enough. Her voice did not tremble. That frightened him. "Apologize," he demanded again. Not a plea, a command. Elena inhaled, slowly. And in that breath lived years of restraint, humiliation, longing and self-denial. "Oh, let me go," she said. The ballroom froze, not metaphorically, literally. Music faltered. Fans stilled mid-motion. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim. She continued, her voice clear, unwavering. You do not get to demand obedience from the same woman you refuse to defend. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Count's face paled. You are exposing us both, he hissed. No, she replied. I am finally visible. The silence stretched unbearably, and then something inside him collapsed. He laughed once, sharply, brokenly. You think yourself free, he said. You think walking away absolves you? Elelanena met his gaze. No, she said softly. It frees me. That was when it happened. The Count of Ravensmere, impeccable, untouchable, admired, faltered. His shoulders sagged, his breath hitched, and before he could stop himself, tears filled his eyes, gasps echoed. Someone whispered his name. He raised a hand to his face, as if embarrassed by his own humanity, and he cried, not delicately, not quietly, but openly, uncontained. London had never seen him like this. Elelanena did not move. She did not comfort him. She did not apologize. She simply watched, not with cruelty, but with finality. Then she turned and walked away. Each step toward the doors felt like reclaiming a piece of herself, long surrendered. The murmurs swelled behind her. Did you see? The way he looked at her, that was not indifference. Outside, the night air was sharp and bracing. Elelanena paused only once, not to look back, but to steady herself. Inside, the Count remained standing alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by people who suddenly saw him clearly, not as a duke commanding respect, but as a man undone by fear, love, and his own choices. And London would talk. Oh, how London would talk. But Elelanena Ashworth would not. She had said everything that mattered. London woke the next morning hungry. It always did after a spectacle. The Pembroke ball was no longer an event. It was a narrative. One passed from breakfast tables to carriage rides, from whispered corners of drawing rooms to the margins of polite conversation where truth was bent into something far more entertaining. By noon, everyone knew a version of what had happened. By evening, no two versions were the same. Some said Elelanena Ashworth had deliberately provoked the Earl of Ravensmere, eager for attention she did not deserve. Others insisted she had been cruel, cold, ungrateful for his interest. A few, fewer but sharper, murmured that the Earl had finally been confronted by the consequences of his own silence. Elelanena heard none of it directly. She did not need to. Rumors had weight. She felt them in the way maids avoided her eyes, in the way footmen paused too long when announcing visitors, in the careful politeness Lady Pembroke adopted, warmer than usual, which meant concern. Elelanena folded dresses with precision, her movements steady. The small room assigned to her had never felt smaller. Lady Pembroke entered without knocking, carrying a folded sheet of paper. "You are famous," she said, not unkindly. Elelanena did not look up. "I would prefer to be invisible." "Too late," Lady Pembroke replied. "London has decided you are interesting." She sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her skirts. "Do you wish to remain here?" she asked carefully. Elelanena paused. The question was not cruel. It was honest. Remaining meant safety of a sort. It meant continued employment, shelter, routine. But it also meant existing permanently, as the woman whispered about, the companion tied to a scandal she had not created. "No," Elelanena said quietly. Lady Pembroke studied her. "I thought you might say that. I am grateful for your kindness," Elelanena continued, "but I cannot stay." Lady Pembroke exhaled. "Where will you go?" Elelanena hesitated. "Somewhere simpler." That was all she allowed herself to say. Lady Pembroke nodded slowly. "Very well," she said. "You will leave quietly. I will ensure no one interferes." She stood, then paused at the door. "For what it is worth," Lady Pembroke added, "you were magnificent." Elelanena's throat tightened. "Thank you." That evening, Elelena packed only what she needed. No letters, no keepsakes from London, only the pearls, and a small book she used to read when the world felt unkind. Before dawn, she left Pembroke townhouse. No farewell, no announcement, just absence. By the time London noticed she was gone, she was already elsewhere. The Earl of Ravensmere discovered her disappearance 3 days later. He had not slept well since the ball. His home felt unfamiliar, too quiet, too orderly, stripped of the illusion that control equaled peace. Every room echoed with memory now. Every silence accused him. He had told himself he would wait. That time would cool the humiliation. That distance would restore his composure. Instead, the absence only sharpened what he had lost. When he finally sent a message to Pembroke Townhouse requesting to speak with Miss Ashworth, the reply was brief. Miss Ashworth is no longer in Lady Pembroke's service. No forwarding address, no explanation. Ravensmere read the note twice, then a third time. Something inside him fractured, quietly, completely. He sent another message, then another. He dispatched inquiries to acquaintances, to households where she might have gone, to distant relations who might know her intentions. No one did, or no one would say. London, so eager to speak of her, suddenly knew nothing at all. Days passed, then weeks. The Earl withdrew. He declined invitations. He stopped attending dinners. He avoided ballrooms entirely. At first, society found this amusing, then concerning, then uninteresting. Isolation settled around him like fog, and in that fog, Ravensmere finally did what he had avoided for years. He thought not of reputation, not of expectation, but of the woman he had failed. He remembered how she had spoken, not with bitterness, but with clarity, how she had not asked for forgiveness or affection or explanation, only freedom. And he had tried to deny her even that. The realization was brutal. He had not loved her poorly because he did not care. He had loved her poorly because he had been afraid of whispers, afraid of judgment, afraid of choosing something that could not be defended with lineage. And now, the world he had protected so carefully felt empty. He walked the streets of London alone, past places where they had once spoken quietly, laughed briefly, dreamed cautiously. Each memory was a wound. One afternoon, he stood before a small bookseller's shop and stopped. He remembered her there once, reading without buying, smiling at passages as if words alone were enough. That was when he understood. He did not miss her presence. He missed the man he had been when she believed in him. That man was gone, and if he wanted any part of himself back, he would have to change. But first, he had to find her. Elelena woke to birdsong, not carriage wheels, not shouting vendors, birdsong. The small house where she now lived sat near the edge of a modest town, far from London's endless appetite. It was plain, clean, quiet. She worked in a small school, helping young girls learn to read, write, and think beyond what the world expected of them. Her past nobility lent her authority here, but not dominance. She was respected, not observed. For the first time in years, she slept without rehearsing conversations that might never come. She walked without being watched. She laughed without checking who might hear. Peace settled into her slowly, cautiously, like an animal unsure whether it was safe to stay. Sometimes memories surfaced. Sometimes his face appeared uninvited, but they no longer ruled her. She was healing. She did not know that miles away, a man was finally learning what it meant to lose something truly, and she did not yet know that loss, when paired with humility, could become the beginning of something honest. But the world has a way of bending paths back toward each other, not through force, but through change. And somewhere on a quiet road leading out of London, the Earl of Ravensmere made a decision that would alter both their lives once more. This time, not as a count, not as a man demanding obedience, but as one willing to ask for forgiveness, without expecting anything in return. The town where Elelanena now lived did not care who she had been. That, she discovered, was its greatest kindness. It was small enough that everyone noticed when a stranger arrived, but large enough that no one asked questions that were not necessary. There were no ballrooms, no chandeliers, no rooms designed for performance. Only narrow streets, modest homes, and the honest rhythm of daily labor. Elelanena rented a small room near the school. It had one window, one table, one chair, and silence. Real silence. Not the tense kind that waited to be filled, but the gentle kind that allowed thoughts to rest. Each morning, she walked to the school just as the sun lifted over the rooftops. The building was simple, its walls worn but clean. Inside, the girls gathered with ink-stained fingers and eager eyes. They did not care that she had once attended grand dinners. They cared that she listened. Miss Ashworth, one of the girls asked one morning, "Is it true that women can choose their own lives?" Elelanena paused. She knelt to meet the child's gaze. "Yes," she said carefully, "but it often requires courage." "Does it hurt?" the girl asked. Elelanena smiled. "Not sadly, but honestly. Sometimes, but not as much as pretending you have no choice at all." The girls laughed, unconcerned with philosophy, and returned to their work. And Elelanena felt something settle into place inside her. Purpose, not borrowed, not conditional. Chosen. In the evenings, she read by lamplight or walked the quiet paths beyond town, where fields stretched without judgment. She learned the names of neighbors. She shared meals without pretense. She existed without apology. For the first time since her family's ruin, she was not surviving. She was living, and peace, once tasted, is difficult to surrender. In London, the Earl of Ravensmere faced a different silence. His was sharp, accusatory. It followed him through empty rooms and echoed in halls built for admiration. The portraits on his walls stared back with the same expression they always had. Confident, unquestioning, certain. He avoided them. He avoided mirrors as well. The world he had protected so fiercely now felt hollow. He had always believed that control equaled strength, that restraint was virtue, that fear, if dressed properly, could pass as wisdom. Now, stripped of distraction, those beliefs crumbled. He walked alone more often. He dismissed servants early. He declined invitations without explanation. And in that isolation, memory sharpened. He remembered Elelanena not as society had framed her, fallen, diminished, inconvenient, but as she truly was, clear-minded, steady, unwilling to disappear. He remembered how she had spoken of fairness, of the quiet cruelty of expectation, of how love offered only in private was no love at all. He had dismissed those thoughts then. He could not dismiss them now. One evening, he stood before the window of his study as rain streaked down the glass. London blurred beyond it, indistinct and unreachable. For the first time, he admitted the truth he had avoided for years. He had been afraid, not of her, but of choosing her, afraid of gossip, of ridicule, of losing the approval of men whose opinions meant nothing now. And in choosing safety, he had lost everything that mattered. The realization did not absolve him, it humbled him. He understood, finally, that regret alone was useless. If he wanted redemption, not in society's eyes, but in his own, he would have to change. And change, he realized, demanded action. Elelanena felt his absence more as an echo than a wound. There were moments, quiet ones, when she remembered his voice, his sharp observations, the man he might have been. But those memories no longer controlled her, they simply existed. One afternoon, she received a letter. The envelope was plain, no crest, no seal of authority. Just her name, written carefully. She hesitated before opening it. Inside, the handwriting was unfamiliar. Slower, less confident. Miss Ashworth, I do not know if you will welcome this letter. I will understand if you do not. I write not to demand, nor to explain myself away, only to say this: I was wrong. I am learning what that means. I hope you are well. No signature. Elena folded the letter. Her heart did not race. Her hands did not tremble. She sat quietly for a long time, listening to the wind against the window. Then she placed the letter in her drawer. She did not respond. Not yet. Because forgiveness, she knew now, was not owed. It was earned. Weeks passed. The Earl of Ravensmere did not write again. He did not pursue. He did not demand acknowledgement. He waited. And in that waiting, he changed. He simplified his life. He restructured his estates with greater fairness. He listened more than he spoke. He learned, slowly, how to exist without dominance. He became a man unfamiliar even to himself. And in that unfamiliarity, something genuine began to form. One morning, he stood at the edge of London, his carriage packed lightly, not with gifts, not with expectations, but with intention. He had learned where Elena was, not through force, through patience. And he made a decision that frightened him more than any scandal ever had. He would go to her, not as a count demanding absolution, but as a man willing to be refused. Elena stood outside the school that same afternoon, watching the girls scatter toward home, laughter trailing behind them like freedom. She did not see him at first. When she did, he was standing at a distance, uncertain, as if unsure whether he was welcome even on the road that led to her. And for the first time, she saw him not as the man who had abandoned her, but as one who had finally learned how to approach without command. Her breath caught, not in fear, in recognition. The past had followed her, not to reclaim her, but to ask whether it could begin again differently, and Elena realized that the next choice would be hers alone. Elena saw him before she decided to acknowledge him. He stood at the far end of the narrow road, where dust met stone and the fields began to open. He did not approach immediately. He did not lift a hand. He waited, an unfamiliar posture for a man once accustomed to command. She felt the old instinct rise, the urge to brace, to prepare, to guard what she had built. Then she reminded herself of something important. This life was hers now. No one could take it without her consent. The school doors closed behind the last of the girls, their laughter dissolving into the afternoon. Elena remained where she was, her hands folded loosely at her waist, breathing in the quiet she had earned. Only then did she turn. The Earl of Ravensmere, no, the man who had once been the Earl of Ravensmere in her life, stood uncertainly beneath the open sky. His coat was plain, his posture careful. The distance between them felt deliberate, respectful. He took one step forward, then stopped. "Miss Ashworth," he said, not her first name, not a title, not a demand. Her heart did not race, it steadied. "My lord," she replied. The word felt distant, like something she no longer carried on her tongue. He swallowed, visibly collecting himself. "I won't stay if you don't wish it," he said. "I only hope to speak. Briefly." Elena studied him. He looked different, not diminished, unarmored. "What do you wish to say?" she asked. He did not move closer. "I came to apologize," he said simply, "and to leave." The words landed softly and precisely. Elena's brows lifted almost imperceptibly. "To leave," she repeated. "Yes." He nodded once. "Immediately, afterward, if that is what you prefer." Silence stretched, not tense, but careful. "Very well," she said. "You may speak." He exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath since London. "I was wrong," he began, "not only in what I did, but in who I believed myself to be." He paused, choosing honesty over elegance. "I thought caution was wisdom. I thought silence could be justified. I believed that protecting my name was the same as protecting my future." His voice tightened. "I was protecting fear." Elena listened without interruption. "I failed you," he continued. "When you needed defense, I chose distance. When you deserved loyalty, I offered secrecy. And when you stood before me with dignity, I tried to command what I had not earned." He did not step forward. "I do not ask you to forgive me," he said. "I do not ask you to return. I do not ask anything." That was new. "I only wanted you to know that I see it now, and that I am sorry, without condition." The air felt still. Elena's gaze did not soften, but it did not harden either. "Thank you for saying it," she said. "Few men ever do." He inclined his head. "I won't trouble you again," he added quietly. She hesitated, not because she owed him more, because she felt something unfamiliar stirring, not longing, not pain, but curiosity. "You've changed," she observed. "Yes," he said, "and I know that may not matter." "It matters to me," she said, surprising them both. He looked up, cautious hope flickering, and then he extinguished it himself. "I understand if it does not change your answer." "There was no question," she replied gently. He nodded. "Of course." She took a step forward, not toward him, just closer to the space between them. "You may walk with me," she said. "As far as the gate." Relief crossed his face, but he kept his composure. "Thank you." They walked side by side, leaving respectful distance between their shoulders. The path was quiet, the fields wide, the sky open in a way London never allowed. "You live well here," he said. "I live honestly," she corrected. He smiled faintly. "That is rarer." They reached the wooden gate at the edge of the path. He stopped. "This is where I turn back," he said. Elena nodded. Then, because courage is sometimes a quiet thing, she spoke again. "If you intend to change," she said, "do it for yourself, not for me." "I am," he replied. "That is the only reason it might last." She studied his face, searching for expectation. There was none. "Good," she said. He opened the gate, paused. "May I write?" he asked. "Only if you wish it, and only to listen." She considered, then nodded once. "You may." He smiled, softly, gratefully, and he left. Days passed, then weeks. He wrote, sparingly, without claims, without persuasion. Sometimes about the weather, sometimes about changes he was making, often about nothing at all, simply listening between the lines of her silence. Elena answered when she wished, and did not when she didn't. They met again, briefly, publicly, carefully, once near the market, once near the school gate. Never alone without invitation. He never touched her without permission, never assumed, never demanded. Slowly, trust, once shattered, began to rebuild itself, not with passion, but with consistency. One afternoon, as they walked near the fields, he laughed unexpectedly. "Do you know," he said, "Lady Pembroke once accused me of having the emotional range of a teacup." Elena smiled despite herself. She was being generous. He laughed, truly laughed, and the sound startled them both. She realized then what had changed. Not his title, not his pride, but his willingness to be seen without armor. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows. "This is as far as I go today," she said. "Of course." He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I would like someday to know you, not the woman I believed you were, the woman you have become." Her chest tightened, not painfully. "Perhaps," she said, "if you are patient." "I am learning," he replied. They stood in companionable silence. And Elena understood something quietly profound. Love did not return with grand declarations. It returned with restraint, with humility, with a man who finally knew how to knock and wait. But healing is not linear, and the world that had once torn them apart had not finished watching. Somewhere beyond the fields, whispers still travelled, and not all of them would be kind. Late summer, the quiet town begins to notice. Change rarely arrives alone. It brings witnesses. At first, it was harmless curiosity. A new carriage on the road, a well-dressed gentleman lingering near the school gate. Conversations that paused just a fraction too long when Elena passed. The town was kind, but not blind. Elena felt it in the way shopkeepers smiled with added interest, in the way neighbors asked questions that sounded polite and landed sharp. "Is he family? An old friend from London?" "You must have lived an interesting life before coming here," she answered carefully. "Enough to be courteous, never enough to invite speculation." The Earl, he insisted she call him by his given name now, though she rarely did, remained cautious. He never arrived unannounced, never overstayed, never attempted to fold himself into her life without invitation. That restraint mattered. It also attracted attention. One afternoon, as they walked near the fields, Elena stopped abruptly. "You are being noticed," she said. He followed her gaze toward the distant road, where a pair of riders slowed too deliberately. "Yes," he replied. "I feared that might happen." She turned to face him. "I did not leave London to rebuild my life under a different microscope." He nodded. "Nor should you." Silence stretched. Then, because honesty had become their fragile foundation, he said what he had avoided. "My presence here may cost you your peace." Elena studied him. "This peace," she said slowly, "exists because I chose myself." "And if choosing yourself now means choosing distance from me?" he asked. She did not answer immediately. That frightened him more than refusal. The letter arrived 2 days later. It bore a familiar crest, London. Elena recognized the seal before she opened it. Lady Pembroke's handwriting flowed confidently across the page. "My dear Miss Ashworth, it appears that the Tun has rediscovered its appetite for stories. Your name has resurfaced, entwined once more with Lord Ravensmere's. There are questions, there is interest, and, predictably, there is judgment. I write not to alarm you, but to warn you. London does not forgive women for being remembered." Elena folded the letter slowly. That evening, she walked alone. The fields were quiet, the sky bruised with twilight. She breathed deeply, reminding herself that she was no longer that woman standing at the edge of a ballroom. She had a choice now, and choice, she had learned, was powerful, but costly. He sensed the shift before she spoke of it. They met near the school 2 mornings later. She was quieter, more inward. "You received news," he said gently. "Yes, from London." She nodded. He did not press. That, too, mattered. "People are asking questions," she continued. "About you, about me, about what they believe is happening." "And what is happening?" he asked. She met his gaze. "I am learning whether the life I built can survive being seen." He exhaled slowly. "I never intended to drag you back into that world." "I know." A pause. "But the world does not always ask permission," she added. He hesitated, then said what cost him pride. "If my absence would protect you, I will leave." The words were steady, not dramatic. She searched his face. This time she found no fear of loss, only respect for her choice. "That is not what I asked," she said. "I know," he replied, "but it is what I offer." She turned away, staring toward the horizon. "I spent years shrinking so others could remain comfortable," she said quietly. "I will not do that again, not even for you." "I would never ask you to," he said. "But if you stay," she continued, It must be because you choose me openly. Not carefully, not conditionally. He did not answer immediately, because this was the moment that would reveal whether his change was real. I am afraid, he admitted. Her head turned sharply. Of losing my place in the world I once protected, he continued. Of ridicule, of failure. She waited. But I am more afraid, he said, voice firm now, of becoming the man who lets fear decide again. Her chest tightened. That night, she did not sleep. She thought of the girls at the school, of the peace she had cultivated, of the life that had finally begun to feel like hers, and she thought of a man who had learned, painfully, how to stand without armor. The invitation arrived a week later. A modest gathering, local, public, not London, not hidden, an opportunity. He presented it without pressure. There will be people, he said. They will look, they will talk. And you? She asked. I will stand beside you, he said, or behind you, or not at all, whatever you choose. Elena closed her eyes briefly. This was not a return to the past. This was a test of the present. If we do this, she said, there is no retreat into silence afterward. I understand. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Relief crossed his face, followed immediately by resolve. The evening arrived quietly. Lanterns lit a modest courtyard. Music played softly. Laughter rose, not trained, not performative. Elena entered beside him. Heads turned, whispers stirred. But something was different this time. She did not feel small. She felt seen. A woman approached her, curious, warm. You teach the girls at the school, she said. Yes, my daughter adores you. Elena smiled, genuine and unguarded. Nearby, someone addressed him, not as a duke, but as a man. The world, it seemed, was adjusting. Slowly, then, inevitably, a familiar voice cut through the air. Miss Ashworth. Elena froze. She knew that tone. She turned. A woman from London stood at the edge of the courtyard, elegant, sharp-eyed, unmistakably Tun. I wondered how far you had fallen, the woman said lightly, or risen. The courtyard stilled. The old script threatened to reassert itself. Elena felt his presence beside her, steady, unwavering. She drew a breath, and for the first time, she did not wonder how to survive the moment. She knew how to own it. The woman from London stood with practiced ease, as if the uneven stones beneath her shoes had always belonged to her. She wore elegance the way armor is worn, polished, deliberate, unmistakably expensive. Miss Ashworth, she repeated, lips curved in a smile that asked for nothing and promised less. I wondered how far you had fallen, or risen. The courtyard quieted. Lanterns flickered, music softened, conversations paused as if on cue. Elena felt the familiar pressure gather, the old instinct to minimize, to soften herself into acceptability. For years, that instinct had kept her safe. Tonight, it had no authority. She inclined her head, not in submission, but in courtesy. Lady, she replied evenly, refusing the woman's name the way one refuses a trap. If you must measure my life, I suggest you begin with accuracy. A murmur moved through the onlookers, small, surprised. The woman laughed lightly. How spirited! I had heard you were quieter now. I am, Elena said, where it matters. The woman's gaze slid to the man at Elena's side, the former Earl of Ravensmere, now standing without title in this place, his posture calm, his presence unforced. And you, the woman said, turning to him. London wondered whether you had misplaced yourself. He met her eyes without flinching. I found myself, he replied. It required leaving. A ripple of reaction passed through the courtyard, some amused, some impressed, some wary. The woman arched a brow. How poetic. London does love a reinvention. Elelanena felt him shift slightly, not to take over, not to shield her, but to be unmistakably present. The difference was subtle. It mattered. Reinvention implies disguise, Elelanena said calmly. This is honesty. The woman's smile thinned. Honesty, she repeated, tasting the word. And yet, you stand here together. One might assume intentions. Elelanena did not look to him for permission. Assume if you like, she said. I do not manage my life to satisfy assumptions. The woman's gaze sharpened. You always were difficult. Elelanena smiled, small, unafraid. I learned that from London. A soft laugh escaped someone in the crowd. Another followed. The tone shifted. Not hostile, not reverent, curious. The woman inhaled, clearly recalibrating. Well, she said, smoothing an invisible crease at her sleeve, I wish you both luck. She turned away, retreating with dignity and tact, but without victory. The courtyard breathed again. Narrator's observation, in the style of Lady Whistledown, how swiftly the scales tip when a woman declines to perform shame. Observe closely, dear reader. The crowd that once feasted on whispers now hesitates when offered certainty. Tell me, do you admire courage more when it is loud, or when it is calm? If you have an opinion, I would love to read it. As the evening resumed, Elelanena felt the aftershock settle, not as fear, but as clarity. That went well, he said lightly, a trace of humor in his voice. She exhaled. Define well. You did not flee, he offered, and London did not devour you. She glanced at him. Your standards have improved. He smiled, then sobered. Are you all right? She considered the question honestly. Yes. They walked a few steps, away from the center, not hiding, choosing space. You did not intervene, she noted. I was prepared to, he said. But you did not need me to. Her chest warmed, not with dependency, but with recognition. That matters, she said. It should, he replied. A local woman approached, kind-eyed, curious. Miss Ashworth, she said, my daughter speaks of your lessons as if they are adventures. Elelanena laughed softly. Then we are doing something right. The woman smiled, then turned to him. And you, sir, are you staying? He answered without looking away from Elelanena. Only where I am welcome. The woman nodded approvingly and moved on. The music swelled again. Lanterns glowed warmer. The evening settled into something unexpectedly gentle. Elelanena felt it then. The pivot. Not toward romance, not yet, but toward choice. She turned to him. This world, she said, indicating the courtyard, the town beyond, the life she had built. It is not London. I know, he said. It cannot bend to titles, she continued. It will not cushion pride. I would not ask it to. She studied his face. If you remain, you do so as my equal, not my protector, not my penance. He did not hesitate. Yes, and if London comes calling again, he answered steadily, I will not answer it. A beat. Say that again, she said quietly. I choose this, he said, not because it redeems me, because it is right. Her breath caught, just once. They stood there, the space between them unclaimed and respected. This does not promise an ending, she said. I am not asking for one, he replied. Only the next honest step. She nodded. Then we will walk, she said, slowly. He smiled. I have learned the value of patience. Later, as the evening drew to a close, Elelanena stood alone for a moment, watching lanterns dim and guests depart. She felt no pull toward disappearance. He joined her, offering, not taking, his arm. She accepted. Together they walked toward the quiet road. Do you regret it? He asked. Standing, she asked, Being seen, he clarified. She considered the sky, wide, unjudging. No, she said. I regret only the years I believed silence was safety. He nodded. I regret the years I believed fear was wisdom. They stopped at the gate. Tomorrow would bring questions, consequences, possibilities. She looked at him, not as a count, not as a past wound, but as a man who had learned to stand without demanding. This is not forgiveness, she said gently. I know, he replied. It is permission, she continued. To continue. His eyes softened. That is more than I deserve. Deserving is not the point, she said. Choosing is. She opened the gate. They stepped forward, together, unhurried. And London, watching from afar, would soon realize that its power ended where a woman's choice began. Early spring, months after the scandal, a quieter life, fully chosen. The town no longer watched them. That, Elena realized, was the truest sign of belonging. When she walked through the small streets in the morning, people greeted her not with curiosity, but familiarity. Children ran ahead of her, calling her name. Shopkeepers asked her opinion on books, on lessons, on their daughter's progress at school. She was no longer the woman who left London. She was simply Elena. Her days were full in a way they had never been before. The school had grown. More girls arrived each term, eager, outspoken, unafraid to ask questions that once would have been dismissed as improper. She taught them reading and writing, yes, but more than that, she taught them choice. That a woman's voice did not require permission, that silence was not the same as virtue, that dignity did not depend on approval, and for the first time in her life, her past did not define her present. He lived differently now, no longer surrounded by constant affirmation. He learned the weight of listening. He worked with his hands when needed. He took instruction without offense. He allowed himself to be corrected. Here, no one bowed. And strangely, he had never stood taller. He did not attempt to reclaim what he had lost in London. He did not speak of his title unless asked, and even then, briefly, without pride. What mattered was what he did now. He waited when Elena needed space. He spoke when honesty was required. He stayed silent when silence served respect. And most importantly, he never again confused love with control. One afternoon, as they walked along the open fields beyond the town, Elena stopped. The sky was wide, unjudging. The air smelled of renewal. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "London?" he replied. "Yes, the life you left." He considered carefully. "I regret who I was there," he said, "not that I left." She nodded. "I used to believe love required endurance," she admitted. "That if I waited long enough, proved myself small enough, it would arrive." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know love should never ask a woman to disappear." He did not reach for her hand. He waited. She took his instead. That choice, small, deliberate, mattered more than any declaration ever could. When the letter arrived from London, it did not shake her. An invitation. Carefully worded. Respectful. Curious. A suggestion of return. A promise of restored standing. Elena read it once, then folded it neatly. "What will you do?" he asked, watching her face, not for hope, but for truth. She looked at the schoolhouse in the distance, at the path they walked each day, at the life she had built with intention. "I am already where I belong," she said. He smiled, not in triumph, but in relief. "Then so am I." And London, for the first time, held no power over either of them. Their love did not arrive with urgency. It settled. It grew in conversations that did not avoid difficulty, in disagreements resolved without fear, in laughter that came easily, without performance. He did not rescue her, she did not redeem him. They met as equals, not defined by class nor wounded by hierarchy. One evening, as the sun lowered and the town quieted, he stopped walking. "There is something I wish to ask," he said. She turned to face him, calm, unafraid. "Yes, not as a duke, not as a man seeking forgiveness," he said carefully, "but as someone who understands your strength. May I continue choosing you, freely, daily, without claim?" She did not answer immediately. Then she smiled, not guarded, not hopeful, but certain. "Yes," she said, "as long as we never forget this was a choice." He nodded. "I never will." And in that moment, love stopped being a promise of the future. It became a practice of the present. This is not a story about a man who won a woman back. It is the story of a woman who walked away and discovered her worth was never tied to being chosen. It is a story about betrayal, yes, but also about healing, about redemption that does not demand forgiveness, about love that survives only when fear is no longer allowed to lead. Some loves are loud, others are quiet, deliberate, and strong enough to last.